We can see her now having a hug just as she approaches the conference podium. I think she's about to take the mic any second. So let's have a listen in. Here's Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, addressing the Labour Party conference.
Pooja, thank you. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your courage. It is just 2 years since Ronan was killed, but Pooja has not stopped fighting for him since. Fighting for Ronan, fighting for other children, for other mums and dads, because no parent should have to go through this unimaginable pain. So Pooja, we salute you, we support you, and now we are in government, we will back you in your fight to save young lives. Ronan's teenage killers ordered the ninja sword online. No checks, no questions asked. Lethal weapons put straight in the hands of children. So this Labour government will bring in new laws to crack down on dangerous online sales and the gangs who draw children in, alongside new youth hubs to steer young people away from violence, a teenage sure start to build hope in the future. And we will make it a mission for our whole country to halve knife crime in a decade, and yes, this Labour government will pass Ronan's law, a ban on ninja swords. This Labour government will. It's 15 years since I've been able to say those words at a Labour Party conference. All those years we said things but couldn't do them. So don't let anyone tell you that politics doesn't matter, because 6 months ago, our party tried to ban ninja swords, but we didn't have enough MPs to win that vote. Because of the election, because of the change you campaigned for, now we do. And you know, 10 years ago, I called for buffer zones around abortion clinics. But we weren't in government. We couldn't make it happen. Now we can, and yes, we have, because no woman should be harassed on the way to a healthcare appointment that is her legal right. It can be hard to trust in change when things have felt so tough for so long. And a year ago, at this conference, I warned about the depth of the damage the Tories had done in 14 years, how they'd taken a wrecking ball to the criminal justice system, so criminals laugh at the law, how they left communities to fracture, so criminals and extremists step in. Conference 8 weeks ago, when the unbearable news broke about a horrendous attack in Southport on little children at a summer dance club. From all across the country, our hearts went out to the loved ones of little Alice, Bibi and Elsie. And that's where all our thoughts should have stayed. The following day, I met the police officers, paramedics and firefighters who were first on the scene that day and whose bravery in the face of such trauma saved many young lives. But within hours, the same Southport police were under attack, facing missiles, bottles and bricks, the most shocking, violent insult to a grieving community and the police officers protecting them, a total disgrace. And you know, then in copycat violence, over the following days, stirred up from a safe distance by the grifters and the agitators online, we saw looting of shops, attacks on mosques, a citizens' advice bureau torched, an asylum hotel set alight, and people targeted on the streets of Britain because of the colour of their skin. And here in Liverpool, on County Road, the burning of Spellow Library, a place where children grow to read, left in ashes. And I spoke to some of those children who live around the library in Walton, and one told me how scared she was that night, how her mum switched off all the lights in the house and told her to stay quiet and sit on the stairs as bins were being set alight along her street. So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime. And you know it happened because criminals thought they would get away with it. They saw the cracks in the system, the impunity that built up through the Tory years. And when they decided to run riot those early August days, they thought no one would stop them. They were wrong. With Keir Starmer's leadership, this Labour government made clear that we would back our police, not blame them. We would stand up for our courts, not undermine them. We would pull our communities together, not divide them. We stood up for the rule of law. Decent people stood up for their communities, and together we put the disorder down. But I'll be honest, I've been shocked by the response from some of those in political parties on the right who once claimed to care about law and order. After rioters attacked the police, they should have given full-throated backing to our brave officers. Instead, too often we've seen them undermine the integrity and authority of the police, even making excuses for the mob. If you remember back in the run-up to Armistice Day last year, disgraceful slurs that were made against the police, which made it harder for them to do their job that day, were treated as a sacking offence for a Tory Home Secretary. A year on, those same slurs have become an article of faith for every Tory leadership contender. It is shameful what that party has become. The Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers, undermining respect for the rule of law, trying to fracture the very bonds that keep communities safe. They have nothing to offer but fear, division and anger, but that's not who we are. That's not what Britain is about. Our country has always championed respect and the rule of law, and that is what this Labour Party will always stand up for. The party of law and order, now a government of law and order once more. And nor will we let disorder and violence silence a serious debate on immigration, something that's been missing for too long amid the chaos, the gimmicks, and the damaging ramped-up rhetoric. A serious government sees that net migration has trebled because overseas recruitment has soared while training has been cut right back, and says net migration must come down as we properly train young people here in the UK. A serious government sees an asylum system in chaos and says we have to clear the backlog and end asylum hotels. And a serious government looks at the criminal gangs who are profiting from undermining our border security while women and children are crushed to death in crowded, flimsy, small boats, and says the gangs have got away with it for too long. We will not stand for this vile trade in human lives. A serious government knows that immigration is important, and that is why it needs to be properly managed and controlled so the system is fair. So rules are properly respected and enforced, but we never again see a shameful repeat of the Windrush scandal that let British citizens down. So in 3 months, we've set up the Border Security Command, launched new investment in covert operations, high-tech investigations to go after the gangs, with proper enforcement and returns. And instead of spending £700 million employing 1,000 people to send 4 volunteers to Rwanda, we are boosting our border security instead, because the best way to do that is to work with countries on the other side of our borders, not to just stand on the shoreline shouting at the sea. So from our border security to our national security, combating changing terror, state and cyber threats, to the security and the safety of our local streets. We know that security is the bedrock on which communities can come together, and on which all the opportunities Labour has always fought for are built. You don't get social justice if you don't have justice, and respect is the very foundation of our democracy, and those Labour values are at the heart of all we do. And they're at the heart of our mission for safer streets, where across the country, where for too long, rising town centre and street crime have been driving people away from our high streets, corroding the fabric of our communities. So this Labour government will bring in new powers on antisocial behaviour, shoplifting and off-road bikes, and we will put neighbourhood police back in our communities and back on the beat. And yes, after years of co-op and USDOR campaigning, this Labour government will introduce a new law on assaults on shop workers, because everyone has the right to work in freedom from fear. And you know, conference, it's so long overdue. At long last, this government will treat violence against women and girls as the national emergency it really is. When Ranim Uda called the police 4 times the night she was killed, no one came. So in Ranim's name, this Labour government will put domestic abuse specialists in 999 control rooms, overhaul protection orders, and go after dangerous perpetrators who put lives at risk. New laws on spiking and online image abuse, a radical, ambitious Labour mission for the whole of government, for the whole of the country, to halve violence against women and girls in a decade, because we cannot and we will not let the next generation of women and girls face the same violence as the last. Our daughters deserve better than this. And why do we do all this? For the same reason that communities came together here in Liverpool and across the country to clear up the damage that rioters had done, to rebuild the broken mosque wall in Southport, to find a new citizens' advice centre in Sunderland, to clean up the streets, because the simple belief that we all share is this: our streets do not belong to the gangs, yobs and thieves. Our streets do not belong to the racists, extremists and thugs. And our streets will never belong to the stalkers, abusers or rapists. The streets belong to us all, and it is time to take them back. So, conference. Of course the work is hard. As a poet once said, our sleeves will grow ragged from rolling them up. But if you need hope that together we can deliver, just look down the road again at Spello Library. After the fire, a young mum from Netherton, here with us this morning, Alex McCormick, started a fundraiser. And donations are poured in from all over the world. Thousands of books, hundreds of thousands of pounds. And already the Labour Council, Labour Mayor and community are restoring and rebuilding Spello Library better than ever before. So when Alex said, let's show the world what community in Liverpool really means, she did her city proud. She did our country proud. Up from the ashes, a symbol of hope, a model of what our country can do. So leave the politics of fear, division and decline to others. The politics of hope is ours. The future belongs to us all. Let change begin. Thank you, conference. Thank you.
Standing ovation there for the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Sorry, that was Jess Phillips there in the green. Very enthusiastically campaigning. She's been a very strong campaigner against violence against women and girls, and clearly appreciated the Home Secretary's remarks there. Let's speak to Danny Shaw now, who is a former senior advisor to Yvette Cooper and a former Home Affairs correspondent with the BBC. Hello to you, Danny. That speech went down very well at conference. What were your the main points that you took away from it?
Well, I thought it was a barnstorming speech from Yvette Cooper, who is a very good orator. And I think she got the flavour of what the conference wanted to hear, which was a message of hope at the end. Change is coming, change can begin, but sort of crafting that on the sort of what she would say is sort of the ruins of the Conservative government, which has stoked division and hatred and fear. But the hope that has come, that has sprung out of the riots when communities came together afterwards to rebuild community centres and so on, and try and clean up the streets after those riots. So that is the sort of the bit of hope that I think that she was sending a signal about, saying, look what has happened after the riots. Communities came together to reclaim the streets. This is what we are going to do. And then she, before that, had outlined a series of ways in which the Labour government intends to do that. I thought the most powerful bit was when she talked about the riots, and she said this wasn't about concerns about immigration, policing or anything like that. It was arson, thuggery and crime. And she got huge response from the audience, from the people in the conference hall. I think that was sort of the strongest part of the speech, and it really tapped in to, you know, a sense out there that what those riots were about was crime, full stop. There are other issues that can be discussed, but most people don't go to the streets and, you know, pelt police vans with bottles and bricks and so on.
Let's talk about halving knife crime in a decade. That was one of the first things she said in her speech. How possible is that? We know we've been seeing it on the news, particularly over the last couple of days, what a huge issue, particularly with these zombie knives. But the pledge was there to halve knife crime in a decade.
Look, it's a very, very stretching target to do that. And the government hasn't set out yet the parameters or the baseline upon which that is going to be measured. So I would hope and expect that that will be set out soon. It will require a lot of work on different fronts, and Yvette Cooper outlined some of that work. Youth hubs, a sort of sure start for teenagers is how she has depicted it. There will be enforcement action on the streets involving the police, and I think some announcements have been made about that, as well as cracking down on online sales of dangerous knives and so on. So there's a series of things that will have to be brought to bear in order to try and get close to that target. Now, I think the government will be judged on whether it's making progress towards that target year by year. Is knife crime coming down? Are there fewer attacks? Are there fewer killings? If they can show they're making progress on that over the next 2, 3, 4 years, then I think people will support them in that mission. If we're not seeing any progress after 2, 3 or 4 years, people will say, well, it's simply that target is simply not achievable. So they've got to show progress over the next few years on that, even if they're not reaching the absolute target yet.
Yeah, immigration, one of the other issues that the Home Secretary talked about. Not necessarily anything that we haven't heard before, but talked again about the setting of the Border Security Command.
Yes, I mean, immigration and the small boats wasn't a big theme in this speech. It was predominantly about law and order, and, you know, Yvette Cooper saying that, well, now we are the government of law and order. You know, that title always used to be something that the Conservatives very proudly sort of wore. So not so much about borders and immigration. It is a huge concern for the Home Secretary, and it is probably the one issue that could blow her mission off course if the small boat numbers continue to rise, and if there's no sort of tangible signs of an improvement in the border and immigration and protection system. If those problems persist, that's clearly something that could cause the party some damage. But this was a speech very much about those other missions, touched on knife crime, violence against women and girls, antisocial behaviour, neighbourhood policing. That was really the message from her speech today. OK,
Danny Shaw, good to talk to you. Danny Shaw, former senior advisor to Yvette Cooper.